You've never been afraid of humans. Not yet, at least, Oren thought as he stared down the barrel of the human intruder's pulse rifle. The gleaming black weapon was trained on Oren's chest, held rock-steady by the human soldier who had somehow infiltrated the Andorian's most secure research facility. Impossible. And yet here the human was. "Lower your weapon, human," Oren commanded, his voice echoing in the stark, brightly lit lab. "You're outnumbered and surrounded. There's no escape." Around them, dozens of Oren's elite security personnel had their weapons aimed at the lone human operative. But the man seemed undaunted, his steely eyes locked with Oren's. He gripped the Andorian quantum phase shift prototype in one hand, the very device he had been sent to steal, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. If the humans acquired this technology, it would be devastating for the Andorian Empire. "I don't think so," the human said coldly. "You're going to let me walk out of here with this device, or I'll take you down with me." Oren scoffed. The arrogance, the sheer audacity. Then again, that's how it had always been with the humans. No matter how many of their kind the Andorians killed, no matter how many of their colonies burned, the humans kept fighting, kept pushing forward, kept striking back, as if they didn't know how to be afraid. Well, perhaps it was time they learned. "You'll never make it out of this facility alive," Oren said. "You're just one man. Do you really think you alone can stop the might of the Andorian Empire? With this device, we will crush your pathetic species underfoot. This is the future of warfare, and humanity has no place in it." The human soldier's jaw clenched. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "We'll see about that," he growled. His finger tightened on the trigger. In that tense, precipitous moment, no one moved, no one breathed. The hum of the quantum weapon prototype filled the air, the device shaking the very fabric of space-time with its power. And Oren knew, staring into the unflinching resolve in the human's eyes, that this lone soldier would die before surrendering. He would fight to his last breath to complete his mission. Because if he failed, if the Andorians mass-produced this devastating technology, it wouldn't just mean the end of the war. It would mean the end of the human race. In that split second, as Oren's forces prepared to gun Nicholas down, the human soldier made his move. He hit his fist against the stolen quantum phase shift device strapped to his combat armor. The device pulsed and whirred, enveloping Nicholas in a shimmering field of distorted space-time. Oren's eyes widened as Nicholas began to flicker and turn translucent, phasing out of sync with normal reality. Pulse blasts passed harmlessly through Nicholas's ghostly form as he charged forward, sprinting straight at the reinforced walls of the lab. "Stop him!" Oren shouted, but it was too late. Nicholas phased through the thick metal walls as if they were nothing but air. Alarms blared and emergency lights flashed as he emerged on the other side, still clutching the priceless Andorian device. The phase shift field crackled and sputtered around him, the technology clearly straining to maintain coherence. He had to move fast. Nicholas sprinted down the stark corridors of the research facility, phasing through every barrier in his path, leaving a trail of confused and horrified Andorian guards in his wake. Pulse blasts and plasma bolts sizzled past him as he ran, his flickering form making him an almost impossible target. But the device couldn't maintain the phase shift indefinitely. As Nicholas burst out of the facility into the harsh alien sunlight, the field finally collapsed with a crackling surge. He staggered, suddenly fully corporeal again, and found himself surrounded by a swarm of Andorian combat drones and heavily armed soldiers. Plasma blasts pummeled the ground around Nicholas as he zigzagged and rolled, his reflexes and combat training just barely keeping him ahead of the onslaught. His hidden stealth shuttle was close, concealed behind a ridge just a few hundred meters away, but crossing that distance under such heavy fire would be suicide. Gritting his teeth, Nicholas primed a smoke grenade and lobbed it towards the Andorians. The grenade burst, filling the air with a thick cloud of obscuring smoke. Nicholas used the momentary distraction to make a break for the ridge, plasma bolts sizzling past him as he ran. By some miracle, he made it to the shuttle with the device still intact. But as he slid into the pilot seat and fired up the engines, a plasma blast struck the shuttle's flank, sending sparks and smoke billowing from the vessel's systems. Nicholas cursed, fighting with the controls as the shuttle lurched and swayed. The cloaking field flickered and died, damaged by the blast. But the shuttle's engines still worked. With a defiant roar, Nicholas gunned the thrusters and rocketed into the sky, leaving the battered Andorian facility behind. Pulse blasts and missiles streaked past the ascending shuttle, but he managed to weave and dodge through the onslaught, finally breaking free of the atmosphere. In the silence of space, Nicholas allowed himself a moment to breathe. He glanced down at the stolen phase shift device, now scarred and pitted from the strain of the escape. The technology was clearly damaged, its indicator lights flickering erratically. Interfacing it with the shuttle's human-designed systems was proving difficult. The Andorian technology was decades ahead of anything Nicholas had ever seen, operating on principles he could barely comprehend. But he had to try. This device was humanity's best hope for turning the tide of the war. Nicholas set course for the nearest human military space station and began the arduous task of stabilizing the damaged alien device. When Nicholas strode into the space station's primary research lab, the phase shift device held triumphantly in his hands, he was met with a stunned silence. Dr. Ivan Petrov, the station's lead scientist, stared at the device in awe and disbelief. "Incredible," Petrov breathed, running his fingers over the sleek Andorian metal. "I never thought I'd see one of these with my own eyes. The potential applications are staggering." Nicholas nodded grimly. "Can you adapt it? Create some kind of phase cloaking system for our ships?" Petrov hesitated. "Possibly, but I'll need more data on how it functions, its power requirements, its limitations. We're talking about technology far beyond our own here. It won't be easy." "Figure it out," Nicholas said, "because if we can't find a way to even the odds against the Andorians, humanity won't survive this war." Word of the stolen technology's potential spread like wildfire through the human ranks. Within hours, military command had convened an emergency war council to devise a plan of action. The decision was unanimous. They had to go back to the Andorian facility, retrieve all research data on the phase shift technology, and destroy the site to prevent the Andorians from continuing their work. It would be a desperate mission, striking at the very heart of Andorian-controlled space. The facility would be heavily guarded, its defenses bolstered in anticipation of a human reprisal. But they had to try. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Nicholas was the clear choice to lead the strike team. His knowledge of the facility's layout and defenses was invaluable, and his skill and bravery in stealing the device had already become legend among the human soldiers. As the strike team geared up and boarded their cloaked dropship, Nicholas couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. The Andorians would be ready for them this time. And the cost of failure was too catastrophic to contemplate. But as he looked around at the faces of his team, the best of the best, each one ready to lay down their lives for the cause, Nicholas felt a surge of persistence. They would succeed. They had to, for the future of the human race. The dropship shuddered as it descended through the planet's atmosphere, the alien landscape rising up to meet them. In orbit high above, the human fleet clashed with the Andorian defense ships in a titanic space battle, plasma beams and missiles crisscrossing the void. But Nicholas's focus was on the mission ahead. As the dropship touched down and the strike team surged forth, weapons ready, all he could see was the towering Andorian facility looming before them. The team moved forward, hugging cover, as a hail of plasma fire rained down upon their position. Andorian soldiers swarmed from the facility gates, backed by the pounding footfalls of combat walkers and hovering drones. The battle was joined, plasma and bullets filling the air, bodies hitting the ground on both sides. Nicholas led from the front, his rifle barking, his heart pounding in his ears. They pushed forward meter by bloody meter, leaving a trail of Andorian dead in their wake. But the enemy kept coming. For every Andorian that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place, fueled by a fanatical commitment to protect their prized research. Nicholas saw his strike team dwindling, good men and women cut down by plasma fire or torn apart by the Andorian war machines. Still, they pressed on. The facility gates were ahead, tantalizingly close. They had to get inside, had to secure the research data. The fate of humanity depended on it. Nicholas primed his last plasma grenade and hurled it at the facility doors. The explosion tore the reinforced metal asunder, creating a jagged opening. With a rallying cry, the remaining members of the strike team charged forward, plunging into the smoke and fire, into the very heart of the enemy stronghold. There was no turning back now, victory or death, for the future of the human race. The acrid stench of burning metal and ozone filled Nicholas's nostrils as he led his team through the shattered outer defenses of the Andorian facility. Bits of twisted debris crunched under their boots. Only 2 soldiers remained at his side, Johnson and Martinez. The rest lay dead outside, their sacrifice allowing this final push. "Stay sharp," Nicholas whispered. "We're in the belly of the beast now." They crept forward, weapons at the ready. The relative quiet was shattered as they entered the main atrium. A hail of blue-white energy beams lanced out from multiple directions. Nicholas dove for cover behind a fallen pillar as pulse blasts tore chunks from the wall behind him. "Johnson, left flank!" Nicholas shouted over the din. But even as the words left his mouth, he saw Johnson jerk and fall, a smoking hole in his chest. Martinez let loose a barrage of covering fire, downing 2 Andorians before a searing beam caught him in the throat. Nicholas watched helplessly as his last teammate collapsed. Gritting his teeth, Nicholas popped up from cover and squeezed off precise bursts. 1, 2, 3 Andorians fell to his aim before his rifle clicked empty. A stray blast grazed his arm, searing flesh. Nicholas ducked back down, pulse pounding in his ears. He was alone now, out of ammo. One hand went to his belt, fingers closing around his last grenade. A voice rang out, dripping with contempt. "This is the end for you, human filth." It was Orin, the Andorian commander. "Surrender now, and perhaps I'll make your death relatively painless." Nicholas's lips curled into a snarl. His thumb flicked the grenade's activator. In one fluid motion, he stood and hurled the device towards Orin and his guards. Orin's eyes widened in recognition, but it was too late. The grenade detonated with a thunderous roar. A blinding flash seared Nicholas's retinas as the shockwave slammed him back against the pillar. When his vision cleared, the atrium was a scene of utter devastation. Where Orin's guards had stood was nothing but ash. Chunks of the ceiling had collapsed, and fires blazed unchecked. Nicholas staggered to his feet, every movement sending jolts of pain through his battered body. But he pushed on deeper into the complex. He had come too far to fail now. At last, he reached the central data vault. Nicholas's fingers flew over the console, initiating the download of the phase shift research. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Orin emerged from the shadows, his blue skin marred by burns and cuts. With a roar of rage, the Andorian leader charged. Nicholas barely had time to raise his arms before Orin slammed into him. They grappled furiously, trading savage blows. Nicholas felt ribs crack under Orin's fist. He responded by driving his knee into the Andorian's midsection. Back and forth they struggled, 2 mortal enemies locked in desperate combat. Blood and sweat mingled on the floor. Finally, with a surge of strength born of sheer human stubbornness, Nicholas managed to pin Orin to the ground. "You fought well, human," Orin wheezed, "but it's over. Even if you escape with the data, we will never stop until your kind is exterminated. We are your superiors in every way." Nicholas leaned in close, his voice cold as space itself. "You've never understood humans, Orin. The more you push us, the harder we fight back. We may be underdogs now, but thanks to you, we're going to become more powerful than you could ever imagine." The computer chimed, signaling the completed download. Nicholas's fist came down, smashing Orin's head against the floor with a sickening crack. The Andorian went limp. Panting heavily, Nicholas retrieved the precious data drive. He limped out of the ruined facility, each step in agony, but a grim smile played across his bloodied face. Thanks to his efforts, humanity now had a fighting chance. The Andorians would rue the day they had underestimated the human spirit. Race. Months passed as human scientists worked tirelessly to unlock the secrets of the phase shift technology. Nicholas paced the halls of the research facility, impatient for results. Finally, after countless sleepless nights and failed attempts, a breakthrough came. "We've done it," Dr. Petrov announced, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "A fully functional human phase cloaking device. It's ready for deployment." Nicholas watched as technicians installed the device aboard the UHSS Defiance. Captain Marcus Rothbart stood beside him on the bridge, tension evident in his stance. "All systems green," the tactical officer reported. "Phase cloak engaged." The Defiance slipped silently through space, penetrating deep into Andorian territory. As they approached Riser 4, Nicholas's heart raced. The massive shipyards loomed before them, a hub of Andorian military might. "We're past their defensive screens," Rothbart said, his voice hushed with disbelief. "They have no idea we're here." Nicholas nodded grimly. "Fire at will." The Defiance unleashed its fury. Missiles and torpedoes streaked towards their targets. Blinding explosions bloomed across the orbital installations. Andorian ships shattered like glass, debris spinning off into the void. Assembly facilities crumbled, reduced to twisted metal in seconds. Alarms blared throughout the Andorian shipyards. Confused voices shouted orders, trying to comprehend the sudden assault from an invisible enemy. "Boarding teams, deploy!" Nicholas barked into his comm. He led the charge onto a crippled Andorian battlecruiser, pulse rifle at the ready. The human Marines stormed through the corridors, engaging pockets of Andorian resistance. Blue blood splattered the walls as Nicholas and his team fought their way to the bridge. There, an Andorian commander stood defiant, antenna quivering with rage. "You'll never defeat our empire, human scum," he snarled. Nicholas met the alien's gaze. "We already have," he replied coldly. His rifle barked once, and the commander crumpled to the deck. Working quickly, Nicholas accessed the ship's databanks. A wealth of strategic information poured forth: deployment schedules, defensive capabilities, resource allocations. He downloaded it all. As the Defiance withdrew, leaving chaos in its wake, the enormity of what they'd accomplished sank in. They'd struck at the very heart of Andorian power and escaped unscathed. Word spread rapidly through Andorian space. Their impenetrable defenses had been breached. Panic took hold as military leaders scrambled to respond to this new threat. Nicholas wasted no time. He coordinated a series of lightning strikes against Andorian colonies and outposts. Human battle groups slipped past enemy lines under the cover of their phase cloaks, materializing to rain destruction upon unprepared worlds. On Talos Prime, an Andorian mining colony, Nicholas led the assault personally. The sky lit up with the fire of orbital bombardment. Andorian civilians fled in terror as human dropships landed, disgorging waves of Marines. "Secure those resource depots," Nicholas shouted over the din of battle. "Cut off their supply lines." World after world fell to the human onslaught. The Andorian war machine, once so mighty, began to sputter and fail as its resources were stripped away. Their fleets, spread thin in a desperate attempt to defend everywhere at once, could no longer resist effectively. Nicholas stood on the bridge of his flagship, surveying tactical readouts. A fierce pride welled up inside him as he saw the fruits of humanity's labor. The Andorian Empire was crumbling before their eyes. But he knew the fight wasn't over. The Andorians would not go quietly into the night. The final push lay ahead, and Nicholas steeled himself for the battles to come. Nicholas stood at the helm of the UHSS Defiance, his eyes fixed on the swirling blue orb of Andoria Prime. The massive human fleet stretched out before him, hundreds of warships and troop transports ready for the final assault. "All ships, engage phase cloaks," Nicholas ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The fleet shimmered and vanished from view. Nicholas felt the familiar disorientation as the Defiance slipped into phase, passing through the remnants of the Andorian defense grid like ghosts. As they entered low orbit, the bombardment began. Streaks of plasma fire rained down on key military installations, turning hardened bunkers into molten craters. Nicholas watched the tactical display, coordinating the assault with ruthless efficiency. "First wave, deploy," he commanded. Drop pods and assault landers streaked through the atmosphere, carrying the vanguard of the human invasion force. Nicholas's own lander shuddered as it plummeted towards the Andorian capital of Zanrahare. The moment they touched down, all hell broke loose. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Andorian defenders poured fire into the landing zones. Nicholas charged forward, his rifle spitting death. "Push them back!" he roared, leading his Marines into the fray. The streets of Zanrahara became a brutal killing ground. Andorians fought with suicidal fury, contesting every inch. Nicholas saw good men and women cut down beside him, their bodies joining the growing piles of blue-skinned alien corpses. An artillery blast rocked a nearby building, showering Nicholas with debris. The concussion separated him from his unit. Ears ringing, he stumbled into a partially collapsed structure. As he reloaded his rifle, the ceiling above him exploded. A massive Andorian warrior crashed through, landing with an earth-shaking impact. The alien commander towered over Nicholas, a crackling particle mace held aloft. "Vermin!" the Andorian spat, swinging his weapon. Nicholas dove aside, feeling the wind of the blow ruffle his hair. He opened fire, but the shot splashed harmlessly off the commander's personal shield. The mace came down again, pulverizing the floor where Nicholas had been a split second before. He rolled to his feet, eyes darting around for anything he could use. There, a severed power conduit dangled from the ceiling, spitting sparks. Nicholas aimed carefully and fired. The conduit ruptured, sending a stream of superheated plasma arcing down onto the Andorian commander. The alien's shields flared brilliantly before overloading. A horrific scream tore from the commander's throat as the plasma seared through his armor, burning away chunks of blue flesh. Nicholas kept firing, his rifle on full auto. The commander's body jerked and twitched under the onslaught until finally collapsing in a smoking heap. Before Nicholas could catch his breath, bullets raked the room. Andorian troops had spotted him. He threw himself through a shattered window, feeling a round graze his shoulder plate as he tumbled to the street below. Regrouping with his platoon, Nicholas saw human forces had punched deep into the city center. The royal palace loomed ahead, its ornate spires marred by artillery impacts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Nicholas led the final push. The palace gates exploded inward under a barrage of bunker-busting munitions. Human troops poured through the breach, cutting down the last pockets of resistance. In the cavernous throne room, Nicholas came face to face with Zarin, the Andorian supreme ruler. The alien monarch knelt before him, antenna drooping in defeat. "This cannot be," Zarin rasped. "How could we fall to you, weaker, inferior beings?" Nicholas looked down at the broken tyrant, feeling a complex mix of emotions churn within him. "You've never been afraid of humans," he said quietly. "Until now." With a nod to his men, Nicholas turned away. The chatter of gunfire echoed through the vaulted chamber as Zarin and his guards were executed. Outside, Nicholas gazed out over the burning skyline of Zanrar. The Andorian homeworld had fallen. Their empire lay in ruins. But as the acrid smoke stung his nostrils, Nicholas felt no joy in victory, only a bone-deep weariness and the weight of all that had been lost to reach this moment.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.